Start?
Yeah.
Okay, that works great. Yeah, so it's John Spinelli, Jazz Venture Partners, and we invest in an area we call human performance technology. We do early stage, so Series A, Series B investing. We're a traditional venture capital fund. And what we mean by human performance technology, honestly, is it's pretty broad, but anywhere where the concept of applied neuroscience allows humans, individuals, to perform better in almost any function of life, and whether that's in a medical condition with a deficit to bring someone up to normal, or if that's in a normal day-to-day environment to bring them from normal to even better or optimal. In a professional setting, can they, learn or be trained more efficiently? Even out to extreme athletics and sports performance. And so it's that keyhole of applied neuroscience that allows us to sort of view the market differently, and obviously how that relates to Transtech is I think, pretty natural.
Alex led Accelerator Ventures. Ventures it's more of a seed fund, so we're really looking for the earliest stages of companies when a market isn't even defined yet. I really like all the stuff I see here because it seems like when you're investing very early in companies, you don't want to be following a whole bunch of other people that are looking at that space. You really want to be in that market early. And so instead of focusing on spaces or specific technologies, we focus more on stage. We apply certain filters to those companies in order to see if they meet our criteria. Some of the filters are use of exponential technology or having some core technology as part of them, being able to be lean in terms of developing a product or coming to market with something. I especially really like what I'm seeing here and how you've all defined a space where it's both positive for humanity, but also there's potential for real business. And I was supposed to end with something?
Well, actually, I'm going to circle back through on that last part because I want to get you to go deeper into it. Okay, so Jack?
Yeah, my background is a little bit different. I came from the corporate buyout world. For the first 10 years, I used capital from the US and Western world to buy Chinese companies and take them public. And then for the last 10 years, right after the financial crisis in the US, I started to bring money from China to the United States, and we buy subsidiary from General Motors or from some other large corporations and then take them public in Hong Kong. But about like 2 or 3 years ago, I started to see that we're facing a tremendous challenges in China, which the statistic is staggering. About 200 million people in China require mental health intervention, and there's only 60,000 therapists. There's tremendous lack of supply there. So I said, well, I should drop everything to focus on mental well-being, especially for China. So I closed my fund, dedicate 100% on this, and funded my company called Cognitive Leap with people from Stanford and from USC. We currently have about 20 people in China, half of them doing development. The other half, we are doing mindfulness, bring mindfulness to China because we think it's a easy, relatively simple solution to take to China, which we can benefit large number of people. So we currently are looking at anything that can help this population of 200 million. So anybody who has anything that can help this group of people, we definitely will have it. And the other benefit that we're doing this can help is that because we are very close to some of the leading hospitals, research institutions, and so forth. Anything that we take to China, we can quickly go through the trial stage and get the numbers back to the United States. So we can also duplicate the test protocol and have product quickly developed in the U.S. for the U.S. market as well. So we are using China as a way to get things quickly, to the point where it become a commercialized product, and we, in the meantime, commercialize the product on both continents.
Thank you. Lauren?
So my name is Lauren. I am an angel investor, but I'm a little bit different than I think most people on the panel, is that I've built my own companies. So I'm more of an innovator, entrepreneur, And I've decided after a certain amount of time in industries, in various industries, from environmental to medicine to development, all kinds of stuff, I decided to take and build platforms for help innovators that are trying to do something different in medicine. So I've been focused on that. So I'm a little bit different. I don't come from a fund of any sort. It's just me and a bunch of other cool people. So I'm just here to support the movement towards transformative technology. And in medicine, we saw this coming about 25 years ago. So the time is now. So I'm just here to support all of you innovators.
Great. And so the second part of the question is a little bit more personal. So what is the personal why? What is the personal interest that you have in transformative technology, in addition to it being a good business? Like, why are you interested?
I, thanks to you, started meditating a few years ago, and I've noticed that I think a lot of people, and I think society, a lot of societies, also a lot in the West, measure success and happiness in different ways. And I think, for example, learning often is just described with school and learning knowledge and not personal learning. And I really, for me, personal learning in terms of meditation has been enormous. And I think that the technology world and the entrepreneurial world hasn't embraced that as much as I'd like to see it happen, and that's why I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, you know, I think probably everybody in this room at some point found, you know, meditation or mindfulness or some practice to actually sort of balance out different elements of their lives. But what I've seen, you know, and this is something that's been going on, you know, across humanity in certain cultures for thousands of years. So nothing new that we're talking about here. What we see is sort of the opportunity to bring sort of technology and or different ways to kind of deliver these same concepts to larger audiences and have you know, sort of a greater impact across humanity. And to Alex's earlier point too, what's interesting about this is there are also the ability to build businesses along the way to help, you know, kind of get that flywheel going. And so that's sort of what brought us, or brought me and my firm into this world.
Mm-hmm. And personal why for TransTech?
You looking at me?
Either.
Well, you're going to have to reel me in at any time. I think this is such a fascinating thing. I started understanding what biofeedback was when I couldn't sleep as a kid. I used to bend my ear back and hear my heartbeat. And then I would start relating to this heartbeat and trying to calm it down and say, well, I can calm my heartbeat down just by paying attention. And how can that, you know, what's the physiology behind that? And so I became a physiologist to try to explore this amazing machine we have called the human body. And I went into medicine as an industrialist, and again, we were missing the mark as what this instrument really is about. And I think what we're doing in transformative tech is the next step to understanding what it is to be human. And when we understand who we truly are and our true nature and our true ability to create and co-create a much more sustainable world than we have, then I think I'm just passionate about that. You can stop me anytime. But this is the most amazing instrument we have, and any technology that can help us understand that more deeply is fabulous.
Great, thank you. And Jack?
Well, I used to work on cross-border transactions, which is very fast-paced and hugely stressful. And when I was doing this, I didn't really feel that, because you don't compare. You know, you have no way of comparing. When you're in this state, you can't split yourself. So about a year ago, I started to learn about mindfulness, and you know, I started to try that and really see some transformational change in me. I could never have ever imagined that this could happen. So I feel very good about this. And I said, well, you know, if it's good for me, it will be good for many other people. So I started to try to bring other people to practice with me, and family members and so forth. And then when I see there's a potential need in China for any kind of help for reducing stress, as you've probably seen the slide that Nicole has shown, that Chinese probably is the most stressful people in the world. So I said, well, you know, maybe I should do that. And of course, in terms, you know, TransTech, the way that I see is that I don't really come in because I see there's tremendous amount of profit. I think, you know, I probably can make money better in the other profession that I used to do. But I think it's very meaningful in a way that you really touch people. I think if you look at Chinese now, they buy all kinds of goods. I think it's not goods that make them happier. It's the goods that make them very unhappy. When I grow up, people are a lot nicer, right? The whole environment in society is a much nicer. Air is cleaner. But nowadays, if you go to Beijing, you'll be choking. It's really hard for people to survive, I guess, for regular people. So I think sometimes, maybe for the short term, I don't know what's the financial implication, but I think for the longer term, people, when eventually they know what they need, and from the bottom of their heart, right? And I think there will be a market that can satisfy the investment return requirements for many funds. And we're here for the very long term. So, short term, if we don't make money, that's okay.
That's actually a great segue into the second question, which is, where are we in the development of this market? I think a lot about, I think there's a lot of similarities, for example, to VR, which was around for a long time and now is finally just starting to kick in. And there's been, companies in this space for a long time, but it feels like we're about to kick in. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, where is this market? How long before it explodes and it's mass market? Or, where are we timing-wise? Do a little bit of forecasting for us.
Want me to go?
Sure.
Yeah, so, obviously the fact that you're able to get 4 investors on the stage here means that there are a lot of people who sense that something, an inflection point is near. I think it's very hard to know exactly when that's about to happen. Otherwise, there would be 400 people all kind of running to fund companies in this space. So you never know exactly when it's going to happen. I think that's why you are talking to slightly more forward-looking investors who go a little bit earlier in the life cycle of companies and are willing to take higher risks or even potentially forego the profit motive early on. But that said, what we believe that it takes to create a sustainable market is the ability to actually create profitable companies. That should not be a bad word. That's something that enables you to actually then build your product, get it out to a larger market, and do more good. And so we look at that as a double bottom line thing. But if you can't build a sustainable company, you're not going to be able to reach a large number of people. So we have to find as an investment firm, companies that are able to do good. We believe that's really important, but also, and first and foremost, make money. Because then you can actually continue to, like I said, get that flywheel going. The stage right now, what we're seeing is this, I look at other, nascent markets that have happened before, like the maker movement, or even, the yoga movement, that came before. At some point, those were very fringe, and now if you look at them, they are absolutely normal, and, maker stuff is in K through 12 curriculums around the world, and yoga is just a normal form of exercise, and there's 25 stores within a mile from here who sell you gear for it. And so it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's no longer, us kind of West Coast hippie weirdos. And so ultimately, it's really impossible to predict where we are along that curve, but we obviously have a firm belief that transition is happening. And then the real question is, how do we find opportunities that are the early ones where we can kind of continue to bootstrap businesses and companies up to show everybody and to kind of get that broader distribution and get people to understand what this is.
I think that for TransTech, it's obviously very early, but the advantage this space has is that there are a lot of winners already that predate this kind of semantical definition of what we're all looking at. Fitbit is a really good example. You can see the iWatch. There's a lot of things that I consider part of this that have shown success. So I think it makes it so that once you have people that have succeeded and made profit, more investors are interested in coming into this space. And I really like how this has been defined. And I think eventually the idea of TransTech kind of disappears because it'll just be obvious that this was something that needed to happen, then that people wanted self-use technology to improve themselves beyond just learning. But we're not there yet, so there's definitely still an educational component to what needs to be done to really help people understand what you're doing. And I think, my friend Charlie Knowles says, at least for me in my industry, there was a period where everybody was a venture capitalist. Like if you were an entrepreneur and you stopped working, then you were a venture capitalist. And he's saying everybody he meets he's a meditation instructor, and he says everybody he meets is now a meditation instructor. So there's definitely like this thing that's happening in, at least in my circles, where a lot of people are accepting this kind of self-improvement through meditation and mindfulness. And it's kind of interesting to meld those two things together, and eventually it'll be apparent for everybody that needed to happen, but it's still early stage for that.
So your question is about VR, right? Virtual reality. We actually are building a virtual, classroom using as assessment of ADHD in China. So we picked VR not because it's something that is a hot concept. Rather, we think it's really a great solution because the way based on the study of our partner Skip Rizzo from USC. He's the guy who created that. This will be a very good way of making the assessment because that's a real life setting. You can't do that in a real classroom where you control some of the distractions and so forth. So this VR in this setting is a perfect fit. So, in terms of when the virtual reality technology, will become a huge mainstream or not, probably it's not that relevant to us. We're only looking at, from the solution point of view, that fits our situation the best. So we think this is a good solution. In fact, our first version will be finished by the end of the month, and we will start testing it probably in November. So we'll see how things go.
And where do you think the trans-tech market is on its curve? Where are we? Are we early? Are we?
Well, I think early or late, it's hard to generalize. Depends on what you do. For what I'm doing with respect to China, I think it's perfect timing. I don't really use the terminology as much because sometimes it's confusing to people. I simply look at the solution. I just need a solution. If the solution happened to be what's branded as a trans-tech, then it's trans-tech, right? So this is how I view it. Same thing as how I view VR. VR, right? People get too excited, then too unexcited. But for us, if it's a great solution to us, I really don't care how people view this. Maybe if I fail, then I probably have a different view, right?
That's a great answer. Thank you. Laura?
So depending on how you define transformative tech, biosensors are well on their way to becoming medical devices. So, there's a huge adoption in the medical system to use biosensors. So that's well on its way, being funded by national groups and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of integrating some of the newer stuff, we have scientists and researchers that haven't validated a lot of this work as having some sort of impact biologically or physiologically. So that we're early there. We're seeing some results, but we're not necessarily integrating that into the medical system so it has global appeal on a medical scale. So I think we're kind of early there. And when it comes to VR, is it entertainment that we're doing? Then we're far along the line of creating that and being able to get funding for that and support it, especially when it comes to games. So it really depends on where you look. But in terms of neurosensors, neurofeedback, all that as an adoption in medicine, it's early. We're early. That's what I'd say.
But one sort of comment on your point there is what we see is there have been 20, 30, 40 years of investment, largely kind of government style investment into the world of neuroscience and sort of scientific research in general around the brain and body that is starting to bear fruits now, and it's being validated in peer-reviewed studies and outside of the lab. And so that's one of those things that we think is absolutely fertile ground then to actually start to go build more mass market products on the back of that validated science. Because ultimately, guys, as entrepreneurs, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to go do the deep research That usually takes decades and tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. But to leverage the fruits of those research to actually go build individual products or technologies that you go after certain consumer segments is much more feasible. So we're seeing like that is absolutely kind of where the state of the state is right now. We're seeing lots and lots of validated science. And then the converse of that is if we, as investors, if we don't see validated science predicating a lot of companies, then we're unable to invest because we need to know that, we're starting on a stable foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also when we look at things that when we see a lot of problem, I don't want to sometimes wait too long for the solution, right? If I see something that may work, as long as it won't harm people, if it's make people crazy, then of course I'd be very careful, right? If you make 200 million people crazy, then you know what to do. That would be a big issue. But I've seen some of those companies here. Thank you so much, Nicole, for creating this ecosystem here. They have some very interesting product, and we are willing to take some bold steps to look at things differently. If some people come back and say, well, I don't have 100 paper validating this, we say, well, let me look at this, and we have an expert look at this. He said, well, we're willing to take a plunge and try this out. Okay, so I think because we funding this mostly ourselves, so we can take a long view. Unless we criticize ourselves or vote ourselves out of the boardroom, then we'll continue to run this. So, we are willing to spend maybe even 3, 5, 7, 10 years to see things to fruition. So, hopefully we can survive to that level.
I'd love to know what you look for in an entrepreneur. And then also, as a secondary question, if it's important to you that the entrepreneur is on a path of personal development. If when you hear that matters or not.
What's this one?
So the first thing is the level of passion the entrepreneur has. So if it's in their eyes and you ask them a question, are you in this for the business or are you in this for the money? And they say the business, then you've got something to work with. And if you can't derail that passion through your questioning process, your due diligence, then that's what makes me stay up at night and get up early in the morning. It's those kind of people that really are driven by their passion to do something different and be the change agent that they are. Whether or not I call it, instead of self-medicating, I'd like to call it self-meditation. I'd like to see us go to replace that self-medication with meditation. But if they are doing that, obviously they're a believer in this whole field. So that does make a difference to me.
I think that for me, what's really key is that the person be dedicated and passionate about what they're trying to build. It really helps and I know it's hard, but if you are doing this thing full time and you're committed to it, and that, obviously the idea you're committed to, if you're a good entrepreneur, you're going to be nimble and it might change and the exact product might be different and the market might change, but the overall goal is to be in this for the long term, that you're really committed to whatever you're building. And when I look for somebody that I want to invest in, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who might be committed and who might have a great idea, but if I don't really want to personally work with them, I have the luxury of not having to work with them. I think, for me, I think over the years I probably did my first investment in 1998, and my aperture has opened a lot because I've learned people that I might have dismissed in the past have been successful, and to me that's been a great learning experience. As to the question, I tend to get along better with people who and I want to work with people that are into improving themselves, not in a larger way, but there are also a lot of people who meditate who are complete jerks. So, one doesn't really, it's overall, do I want to work with them? I believe that they can do this, and are they passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah, similarly, I think all of us this business has evolved enough for us to know like the telltale signs for what's going to lead to success and an enjoyable kind of ride along the way for both sides, as you don't want to jump into a relationship with someone that you're going to be bumping heads with on either side of the table, because these things go on for years. And so for us, in addition to all the passion and vision, and is someone who's self-aware, because like Alex said, the one thing that I can guarantee you is there will be bumps along the way, and you will need to change and pivot, and someone who can fundamentally listen and be thoughtful, and then ultimately factor that into their vision, and not that they need to change on a regular basis. In fact, I kind of like that people have a dogged persistence, but on the flip side, life will change, and so you need to be able to, the personality type that rolls with the punches. So you don't have to meditate to inherently have that personality type and that self-awareness, but the Venn diagram of those people is starting to overlap more and more, and whether they're finding meditation or meditation is what got them there, who knows? I don't know with causality, but so it's not a requirement, but it certainly seems to be happening in our circles a lot more than it did a couple of years ago.
Right. I think it's hard to think that if somebody's in a trans tech business has no idea about mindfulness or meditation, it's hard. It's hard to imagine, right? And also, second thing is really commitment. The way that I see commitment is that I don't have to close my fund. I can still, open it and do a bunch of things and making money, right? But I think you have to sacrifice if you want to dedicate to do something. So it's not easy work, right? But I say, I'm 100% committed to this, and people come to me and say, Jack, I want to do this deal, do that deal. I said, no longer doing this deal. I only give free advice. So when the people say free advice, they won't feel comfortable coming to me getting free advice after a few times. So I basically say no to people. All right, so if somebody come in, I would expect them to be conscious and also extraordinarily dedicated to what they do, because running and creating business is very difficult. I've done that a few times in the past, and have a fun. And now I'm doing this again, focus on single-minded, just on this particular industry. So I like to work with like-minded people.
I just want to add something. If you are on the other side, if you're the innovator or entrepreneur, you need to look at the investor the same way. If that investor is not going to give you what you need and is not meeting you where you're at, you're just asking for trouble. So you can ask the investor, do you meditate, or what is your mindfulness practice, or are you aware of what this industry is doing, or are you in it for the money? I think it has to be a two-way street, and investors have a responsibility to do their own work. I think that we have a whole leadership question when it comes to investing and conscious capital and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's an open-ended, double-arrowed question, really.
So another thing that I want to point out is, I think it's, if you want to build a business, focus on building a great business, a great product. Don't think about money, because once you think about money, you're multitasking. Once you're multitasking, you're not very effective, so you probably won't make money. So I think it's better to be just focus, razor sharp on what you do.
Yeah.
I like to say something not opposed to that, but I think if you can build a product where people are willing to pay for it, and it doesn't have to be right away. Obviously, there are a lot of businesses that are garnering, it could be eyeballs, it could be a lot of other things, it could be interest, it could be news or information. People are, but in the long term, if you can build a financially sustainable business, that potentially can let your investors make money, you're going to have a lot more options and a lot more time to try and hone that and make something successful. I don't think that profit is the only thing to look at, but it is, if you're an entrepreneur in this day and age, it is very important that not in the short term, but in the long term, you build a sustainable business, and part of that is building a financially viable one.
Yeah, and the way the lens we view that exact same equation through is ultimately make a product that people love, that they can't put down, that that really meaningfully transforms their life in some way, whatever your specific goal is, such that it really the juice is worth the squeeze. But also you need to see how that could make money at some point. But if you delight your customer, you will have many, many, many more options to actually figure out how to make money with it. So you need to, in our world, you need to make sure that that the bucket actually holds water first as you pour it in, and then two is that you actually carry it far enough to get something back out.
Yeah, one of the things with the lab, and just my own perspective coming from business as well, is that when I think about this space and I think about what we're trying to create in it, I've met so many people in the process of the last 2 years who they really truly would love to work at a transformative technology company, and maybe they aren't that first entrepreneur, maybe they aren't the person who can go and do it, but they would join a company that could employ them. And so it's so important for, I think, the entrepreneurs to build businesses that are sustainable, are fundable, have fantastic products that can grow, because then they can also employ a lot of this fantastic talent that just doesn't necessarily have the appetite to be that first entrepreneur, but they are ready to go. I get calls every day from people who are asking me sort of who's hiring and who's looking for what, so that they can come and join this movement, but they aren't necessarily the entrepreneur. So I really encourage, I agree with these guys on creating sustainable businesses. And so that also means profitable businesses over time.
Yeah, I'll say that that's actually exceptionally good news. So we usually have lots of bad news here in the Valley. It's tough to get a business going, it's tough to get funded, everything's hard. But on the flip side, talent is, for most companies here, the hardest thing to actually solve. Once you have the financing, how do you get the right people in the door to do the job? And mostly in the software technology business, there's a finite market and everybody's pulling, and these are big publicly traded companies that are willing to compete with little startups for that same talent pool, and it's really hard to compete for most people. What I'll say is, in this space, the good news is that, in my experience anyway, there are so many people who in their day-to-day job are looking for some extra form of meaning, and that they are having those double bottom line opportunities where they can help build a business, but they can also leave a wake of some goodness behind. And so getting talent to jump into sustainable, viable trans opportunities, I think, is actually easier than it is in a lot of other places in the Valley right now. So I think that's a really positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was joking with a friend of mine was looking for a head of a technical role for something, and she had met with one person who wasn't quite a fit, and my response to her was, oh, just wait, because it's like every round of Vipassana retreats, creates another group of people that are like, wow, I want to do this, but I need to find a place where I can go. So we're at 10 minutes left, so I'd love to take some questions from the audience on for investors. You have 4 investors here to ask questions of. Try to ask something that's useful for a few people.
I'd just be curious, what size deals are you guys looking for? I think you need to use
The question was, what size deals?
I think you'll find a different answer with all of us, but Jazz plays in the, it's not about size, it's about stage of evolution of the company. So we tend to be in the Series A or Series B, and different types of companies or different types of products and services have different capital requirements. How much money do you need up front to get it going? And so, but usually by the time somebody gets to Series A, like I said, the science in this world has been proven out. You have kind of an early prototype of a product. Some early customers have said, yeah, that's great. And then, you're kind of in the, how do we scale this business or validate it against a larger market? So, that usually maps to, between $1 and $5 million into those types of companies. But the answer is it depends.
And I think the amount we invest really depends on the stage of the opportunity. I've done personal investments of very small, $25K, into just backing an entrepreneur that I knew was great, ranging to $200K out of the fund in a larger maybe seed round. And then what we're doing now more is looking at even later stage opportunities where we put some money in and then build a syndicate of our current LPs, our limited partners that invest, and then invest that way through a special purpose vehicle directly into later stage companies. And I think whereas for my overall investment strategy, I've been very stage focused. I think in this industry, there are different companies that are at different stages, and I look at this industry more holistically and say, depending on where the stage of the company is, it could go up and down that capital requirements spectrum.
So ourselves, we're not a typical investment entity because we currently just focus on brain health and on a market, the addressable market that we focus highly on, 200 million people, right? So we currently have ADHD assessment products, so anything that can help this group of people improve their condition, I think it's in our pathway, we'll be interested. Regardless of the size, I came from the bio background. If a company that is a mature, we could do that as well. If it's a very early stage, we can do that as well. So we are very open in that regard.
Lauren?
And for myself, I'm more on a mentorship program now. I've got enough investments, because that's just me. But it would vary on each industry and each business and each opportunity. So anywhere from like 25,000 to a couple million. But I'm right now spending more of my time with nonprofits and mentoring those that ask for help.
Can I comment on that for a second, though? So, obviously, capital, cash, money is what pays the bills. It gets you your groceries at Safeway, keeps the lights on in the house. But don't underestimate the value of having the right mentors around the table, because honestly, that's going to help you wisely use that cash when it does come, and or make the existing pile go a lot further, and likely, really, really shape up the odds that you will have a fundable thesis kind of downstream. So, surround yourself with great people would be my first advice as you kind of get this thing going.
My question is, do you think as investors you're more mindful than other investors in terms of what you do with companies? I mean, when you invest, you could be very capitalistic, like very aggressive, that's what you need to do, etc. Or whether you have a different approach.
Well, I'll go since I'm talking here. Yeah, I can't speak for the whole world of venture capital. I'd say, having been an entrepreneur before, my observation was that I didn't really like too many of the people that I met in the venture capital world. And that might just be my personal experience, or it might be indicative of the industry, 10 or 15 years ago. But what I will say is, what our firm set out to do was to actually, really have a more balanced relationship with entrepreneurs. And I don't know if that necessarily means more mindful, but it certainly means like really saying, hey, both of us are, it takes two to tango. We're both equal partners in this relationship, whether we choose to fund or not. And just, the odds are not in the favor of any one entrepreneur getting money from any one venture capitalist. That's just the nature of the beast. But making sure that it's an equal, balanced, fair, respectful, exchange that happens. And I'm seeing that around what I think is a lot more of the industry as well. So I think it's just a maturing of this business too.
Great. So we have 1, 2, and then 3. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much for this. My question would be, should we think of more innovative business models for the companies which are emerging in this space? And I'm particularly thinking towards social enterprises, less profit and more doing good.
So your question is, are there more innovative business models needed?
So in terms of funding, do we need more innovation in the way we do funding, or the way we do innovation? build companies.
So innovation in the way companies are built.
Yeah.
Um,
So like the triple bottom line is instead of the double bottom line, conscious capital, that kind of thing. Is that what you mean? I think there's some models coming that are successful and taking more of a global and sustainable approach. I think investing itself, the world of investing and leadership in corporate leadership is also changing. So we're all part of this whole movement, not just technology. There's a whole bunch of things changing at the same time. So I think there is change. Whether or not this panel is addressing that, I don't know. I can't speak to that.
I think that maybe I'm really old school, but I'm investing money on other people's behalf, and they entrusted me with their capital, and they expect me to return more than they gave me, and so it's really important that at some point I see a path to an exit somehow. If you're really building a social company, then I'm probably not the right funding sources. There are others. I mean, I also work with a lot of nonprofits as an advisor, but then that's different from my investing world.
Great.
And I see one thing that I have observed is that frequently in this space things begin their life as funded by grants or philanthropic efforts, but then to get scale there is kind of that moment where it says, okay, we have to try to build a real business here, and but yeah, I think you are seeing an evolution in the way like a lot of these things are kind of getting bootstrapped or financed, but it's never easy. It's just sort of the short answer.
My question really is on the technologies. I know you've alluded earlier to exponential technologies. So what specifically are you guys looking at that? Are you looking at AI as a core because that's important for investment and scale? VR, AR is another great industry right now and technology-wise. So from patents or copyrights, whatever that's going to help you get to the exit, what are the key technologies that you're really interested in the trans-tech space?
I mean, my point about that was more that I'm less interested in investing in a business model innovation or a content play around trans tech, like meditation information, and looking more at companies that have some core technology. So at their core, they are a technology company, and whether it's AR, VR, AI, any other A's you want, that at their core there is some engineering that's the basis of it. Now, it can be engineering applied to other existing businesses, but there has to be some. I'm looking for technology companies, not media companies or things like that. So yeah, all those. If you associate your company with a lot of those right now, it'll probably be easier to get capital because other investors are looking for AI or deep learning or VR. So if that's truly true to what your mission is, then it's great to have that.
Yeah, you can't just slap a bunch of buzzwords, unfortunately, on your business and have it, be sexy. But if it does happen to have those themes around it, there's definitely, a trend in investment that kind of aligns with that. So that's to your favor. But you can't just kind of artificially bolt them on.
Okay, so this is our final question.
Hi, this is for Mr. Chen. Hello. So quickly, you talk a lot about influencing a very large population set with a particular tool within education, so to affect ADHD. So this is a policy lens that I come through. So when you're building these techniques to, I guess, fix ADHD across many, many children in an economy, are you using case studies? What's the diligence behind these new policies in education within maybe your borders? Thank you.
I'm not really talking about policy issue. I'm talking about the large number of people that requires some kind of help, mental well-being and help. And among our first product is one product address ADHD issue. So it's not like you have 200 million people that has ADHD issue, right? So everything we do it with evidence-based. It doesn't come out of blue that we think that we like this particular approach. We do it. We look very deeply into a lot of studies that has been done in paper and so forth. Definitely we will be addressing segment by segment, problem by problem, and one at a time. So this is how we approach it.
Great. So I want to thank you guys so much. I'm deeply appreciative that you came back to join this panel. If we can give a round of applause for our panel. And that's it. Our next panel is VR.